All right, so let's continue on with economic sectionalism. So we've seen the industrial and urban Northeast, we've seen the breadbasket agrarian farming Midwest, and we've seen the South with King Cotton and slavery ruling the day. And now we look at the West. Now, when we're talking about the West, we're seeing a lot of unorganized territories. By 1860, Oregon and California will be states. But it was very unorganized, and for a lot of time they kind of saw the West as a desert of sorts. Many times this area in the middle, the Indian Territory, aka Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, the Rocky Mountain area, they sometimes called this the Great American Desert because there wasn't a lot of topsoil. You can see very little agriculture taking place here. There's some cattle herding, there's some mining that's taking place. You see a little bit of farming out west and around the Great Salt Lake, but there wasn't a lot of economic activity out here besides mining and cattle ranching. So there wasn't the agricultural methods to be able to do a lot of farming, or especially on a large scale. So there weren't a ton of economic opportunities out west, but it represented the possibility of a fresh start, a new opportunity, more freedom. And that's an important concept that, is still somewhat present in the more open and sparsely populated areas out west today. So one economic activity was to become a mountain man, which, I mean, come on, how American does that sound? So the mountain men, they were starting to spring up in the 1820s, and they were some of the earliest settlers into the Rocky Mountain area, and these men would serve as guides and pathfinders for settlers that were crossing the mountains and going into California and Oregon, where there were some opportunities for wealth. Of course, the great gold rush of 1849 that started at Sutter's Mill when gold was discovered in 1848. There are some very fertile valleys in both Oregon and California as well for farming. So you could be a mountain man, and you could basically be a guide to get settlers through the tough parts of the Oregon Trail, which is just a fantastic computer game that I hope all of you had a chance to play at some point in your childhood. There was, like I said, a lot of mining. The gold rush was a big one. There are some other heavy metals out there that could be mined. Very dangerous work. It's also why we saw a lot of Asian immigration to the West Coast. Chinese miners were more advanced than ours, and we will see large Asian populations along the West Coast, and some of the most early immigration restrictions will target these groups. And there were some limited opportunities for farming, but overall, you were just kind of eking by. Frontier life was very, very difficult for both men and women. Whether, you're in Oregon or California or modern day Colorado or Utah, men and women worked from sun up to sundown. They're building their own log cabins or improvised shelters. A lot of them died at an early age from malnutrition or a disease, or, a basic medical problem because there weren't a lot of doctors and things out there. Women on the frontier had to serve a lot of different roles. Everyone's living in a state of isolation, but women really served as the nurses, the doctors, the teacher, the seamstress, the cook, the chief assistant in the field, the mother to the child bearer. Women had a lot of responsibility on the frontier. Just lots of endless work, and lots of rigorous aspects of your life. And women on the frontier also had, a shortened lifespan because of the isolation, endless work, and, imagine giving childbirth on your own out on the frontier. It's going to be very, very difficult to do. So limited economic opportunities out west, and a need for more connections, so that way they can start to get connected back in to the economies of the Midwest, the Northeast, and the South. So tough life out west, but an opportunity for a fresh start and lots of cheap and available land out there as well. So as we start to look forward here, and we see how all the causes of the market revolution, this economic sectionalism impact the country, we're going to see these economic differences start to create a lot of political differences. Tariffs are going to be hotly contested. Internal improvements are going to be another area of contention of who should pay for them and who they should benefit. And we're going to see some of these economic tensions and some of this economic sectionalism cause a lot of political tension and sectionalism. That's pretty obvious to see from slavery in the South, because if the South wasn't using slavery, the Civil War possibly could have been prevented if there were different labor sources or just a different economic makeup. We could have seen the Second Revolution, one of the bloodiest war that our country has seen when it comes to American casualties, prevented. So all of these things are going to boil over. But we also know from what we've studied in the past that these differences were present very early on. When you looked at the Northeast, the Middle colonies, the Chesapeake, and the Southern colonies, they all had very different economic structures and makeups. They had very different societies, different immigrant groups, different religions that they practiced. And all these differences will eventually come to a head and culminate in the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. And there's a lot of economics that play into the Civil War, and we'll explore that a lot more in class as we move forward, and also as we look at the impacts of the market revolution. So, typical reminders, make sure you have that vocab finished up, make sure you have our post-lesson questions finished, make sure that if you have any specific questions about the information presented, you have them written down so we can talk about them and discuss them during class, and then bring all of your notes and your post-lesson questions to class tomorrow so we can have a good discussion about the differences of these economies and then how those differences start to cause more political tension as well. Great job once again with your flip lesson, ladies. Hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you tomorrow in class. Have a good one. Adios. Peace. Mañana.